So say we all.
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 Welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. I'm Kyptan, and joining me today we have Little Red Book,
Hi, everyone.
Befuddled Panda,
Hello.
and Hurinfan.
Good morning.
Today we're going to be talking about the first two entries in the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. So that's All Systems Red and Artificial Condition. Published in 2017 and 2018, respectively, this series launched with a bang. All Systems Red won both the Hugo and Nebula Awards for the Best Novella of 2017. This is going to be a 25-75% episode, with the first section talking about general impressions and world building in All Systems Red, with minimal spoilers. Then we'll take off the kid gloves and get deep into spoilers in the back three quarters. I'll make sure to give a disclaimer when that's about to start. In case you've never heard of this series before, or are unsure of what it's about, the Murderbot Diaries follow the story of the eponymous Murderbot, a security robot-human hybrid that is broken free of its programming. However, instead of killing all humans, it mostly uses its freedom to secretly watch soap operas on the job. Yup, it's a fun premise. Okay, guys. So let's start with first impressions. What do we think of the name The Murderbot Diaries? Is it fun, misleading, intriguing? What?
Well, do you want me to go first?
Sure.
So, Panda pitched this in the chat, and when she said, we should read a book called Murderbot, I was like, I'm down. It was, I didn't know what it was about. I knew nothing about it. I'd never heard of it, but I was like, that's great. It's like Axe Cop. I'd read a book called Axe Cop. I mean, I have read a book called Axe Cop.
Writing down X Cop.
So,
Yeah, I'd already heard of it. And I have to admit, the first time I heard the word Murderbot, I was not excited. When I heard Diaries, I was more excited. Putting those two together, I was like, okay, what's going on here?
I read All Systems Red last year for Reddit Bingo, and I liked it well enough. But as for the title, I like how well it conveys the thinking of the Murderbot. It's like kind of self-deprecating, self-hatred.
And that's the thing that I think of the title as like a little bit deceptive. Because and that's brought up within the novel itself about how to an outsider the name Murderbot might not carry over the self-deprecating humor of the protagonist. You might be too inclined to take it at face value and think it's about a killer robot that likes murdering people.
The characters in the story do.
Some of the characters in the story do. That is correct, and some don't. And I think it is a reflection of how well they understand Murderbot, even though Murderbot makes it very hard for them to do so. So off of that name, let's talk about its status as a novella. How do you guys feel about the length of the books? They're about 160 pages long. Some people think the shortness of a novella hinders a story, especially yeah, especially the world building. Do you feel this should have been expanded into a full novel?
I personally actually really enjoy the novella format. It felt like because now there are four novellas and one full-length novel, it felt like the novellas are episodes within a show, and then the novel is like that movie special. And it was episodic, but there's still that overarching story that flows through the first and the second and so on and so forth. And so to me, because there's depth from Murderbot's perspective, I didn't feel like the world building was that limited. And it actually made me want the novella format, made me want to try out the book more because it wasn't as big of a commitment. I could see, do I like it? If I do like the first one, then I'll continue.
I agree completely. I really like the novella because it's I don't read a lot of novellas. I'm mostly a long book guy, but
Same.
it takes very little commitment, and I think uh, the character is the reason why I read it. So I enjoyed the world building, but the thing is, first person, we understand it very well, and novella works well for that purpose. It kind of reminds me of the Witcher series. Has anyone read that?
I've only read the
Yeah.
first book.
Well,
Yeah.
the first stories aren't novellas, but they are just lots of short stories, and a lot of
Mhm.
people prefer those to the later novels, and uh, I can understand why.
I think
Well,
the depth of character that Martha Wells manages to put into such a short format is really exemplary.
hmm
And it doesn't feel, after I've read one of these, that I've only read a novella. Like, the
Hmm.
characters aren't shallow in any way, especially Murderbot. Um, and just the amount that we get to see and the amount that is managed to be packed into these 160 pages, uh, I have nothing but appreciation for it.
yeah, I don't think it suffered at all from its brevity. And as Huron and Panda also mentioned, I mean, we all read a lot of really long books, and it's nice to have something that's short and sweet and action packed. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun. Like it deals with all these dark issues of like identity and stuff, but it's like this great action packed adventure spy novel. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. The action sequences are pretty fantastic, but also it's a lot deeper than I expected it to be when I
hmm
when I first picked this up, and I picked it back up yesterday, and I read both of these as a refresher. But it was just as deep on the second read. It
Yeah.
was more so, given what I know now from the later books.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, especially a certain character from the second book, with a nice acronym name.
Don't give it away.
Fantastic to pick up that again.
Yeah, so I've read them twice in the last 2 days. Well, read. I've listened to them twice in the last 2 days.
Wow.
And the first time it was really fun to just read it for the adventure, and the second time I got to think about all the issues it was talking about. I was at work. I was listening to it at work. It's not and they're only like
That
3.5 hours long a
that
piece.
actually leads perfectly into my next question.
Okay.
Um, you listened to it twice. Did you feel like you needed the second read to maybe understand all of what was going on at the start of the book? It really throws you into the deep end with some technical jargon and like expects you to pick it up as you go along. How long did you think it took you before you had a handle on the technology and all the acronyms and names and things of the book?
I would say, like, probably about a quarter into the first book, I could basically understand what different stuff was. I mean, I'm not a huge tech person, but I work in databases, and so
Yeah.
I kind of knew what was going on pretty quickly. Um, and it, it instead of coming up with a bunch of really complicated names, like a hub system, well, I know what a hub is, you know. A sex system, okay, so a secondary system. I thought
That
it
was
was really
that was supposed to be security system.
oh, well, whatever. But you know what I mean.
Executive security.
But the point is I got that it was a thing that was like part
Yep.
of and so I thought it was really great in the way it handled language because it wasn't confusing if you didn't know a bunch of stuff, but you just had a basic, like, I've used Excel type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Panda, Huron?
Yeah, so I work with engineers at my job, so it wasn't that difficult for me to pick it up, but I could also see like the concepts were simple enough and familiar enough that it wouldn't be a big barrier for somebody who doesn't work with databases or anything to read and enjoy the book and follow along.
I thought it was pretty clear. The jargon and whatnot was pretty easy for me, at least. I listened as well.
Okay. Interesting. Before we dive into spoilers, what were your overall feelings and ratings for All Systems Red?
I'm really excited that we're having a cast episode and we get to all gush about it. I think we're all gonna gush about it. That's how I feel.
I'll start. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's a fantastic book, and I think that anyone interested in sci-fi should go pick it up and read it.
I think I already
Agree.
gushed about it. I just said it was so much fun, and it sneaks in some really deep issues in this action adventure spy novel. I mean, it was great. It was a 10 out of 10 for pure enjoyment.
I enjoyed it quite a bit as well, and my enjoyment mostly stems from the main character and how relatable it is, despite being a construct.
Yeah, I agree with everything that people have said. I This was my second time reading All Systems Red and my third time reading Artificial Condition, and I enjoyed both probably even more than upon my first rereading.
I'll second that. I definitely enjoyed it more on my second read.
Oh, I did too. I mean, that's
Very
part of the
well.
reason
I mean,
why.
your
I-
reading and listening happened within hours of each other.
Well, I did it, but I did it because I wanted to actually. So I think it got like when it starts out, you're like, oh, this is a fun adventure story, and then you get about halfway through the first one, and you're like, oh, actually, this is more than that. And so I wanted to re-listen to kind of really think about what the book was talking about, besides all the explosions. I mean,
Okay.
I like
Now
explosions.
let's get into it now. Warning, we're about to start talking spoilers for both books. If you're not okay with that, please turn the episode off now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Favorite parts. Let's go deep.
I liked whenever Murderbot meets another construct, and it's like, hey, could you help me out? I'll give you media, and they bond through media, and that's just me. That's how I bond with people, and especially it and Art.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Like Art's always like pretending like he's like not. I don't really understand Art, but Art's hilarious because the first time they're watching what was it, Sanctuary Moon?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
The rise and
he's like,
fall of
yeah.
Sanctuary Moon.
It's like I had to stop it a few times because Art wanted to pretend like he's not crying or he's not like moved. There's a character dying
Oh,
and
that was the
he had
ship
to
one.
stop watching.
That was the ship
Yeah.
one. It wasn't. It
That-
wasn't.
that
That
was-
wasn't Art.
That was World Hoppers.
Yes.
When they were
I'm
watching
sorry.
World Hoppers, Art would get really upset whenever one of the characters would die. and then
Mhm.
Murderbot accidentally shows him
A
some
real one.
based on true events entertainment,
Right. It was
and then
wrong.
like some people actually died, and Art flipped the fuck out and like went silent for 10 minutes.
Ha! It
Yeah.
wasn't me this time, Kip. It wasn't me.
But no, my favorite Art moment is when Art later relates to Murderbot. Is like, and Murderbot says, "How did you know how to do all of this?" And then Art replies, "Episode like 379 of Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon."
Oh yeah,
How do you
when
know how to
he
clean
had to
up
like
these bodies and blood?
yeah, exactly. That was a great moment.
I like the part where Art says to him, I'll defer to you about killing people. Why don't you defer to me about analysis?
Data analysis.
Data
Yeah.
analysis. That was so great. So I like how Art kind of acts like a psychiatrist to him.
Mm.
And he asks him really pointed questions to make Murderbot think
Mhm.
about why he's making the decisions that he's making. And the people in the first one tried to, but they always couched it in the words of feelings, and Murderbot's very uncomfortable with feelings.
Especially the word feelings.
Yeah, exactly. How do you feel, Murderbot? Except they don't call him that. They call him Secbot, right? Anyway,
Sec unit, yeah.
Sec unit. Okay. So Art is able to talk to him about his feelings without triggering that response. So Art's a psychiatrist is what I'm saying.
I see
Hmm.
that. I agree. He
A
definitely
robo-psychiatrist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he helps Murderbot think through. And especially the part where um Murderbot basically realizes that he does need to, or it needs to make adjustments to its physical being to be able to pass more as an augmented human. And Art was just talking him through, even though Murderbot's like, I really don't want to. And the part about growing hair, like how humans have these like, little hairs. And Art's just like arguing with Murderbot, and finally Murderbot's like, fine, you're right. I have to do this.
Yep. And then Murderbot later acknowledges, yeah, Art made the right call.
Uh-huh.
I hate it when
Art-
Art's right.
I hate it
yeah,
when Art's right.
exactly. He's such an asshole, but he's right.
Which, I love.
Alright,
I can't imagine why you would love that.
Asshole research transport.
Exactly.
I'm going to start swearing now because you guys have all sworn and I have not.
So, based on what people have said, or said and then corrected themselves on, what do you unintentionally assign as far as gender goes to Murderbot? Murderbot's very clear that it is a genderless construct with no sex and no genitalia, and no interest in sex or genitalia. Fast forwards through the sex scenes and the romances in its entertainment. Always make sure to respond with disgust or indifference to such inquiries. But it's real hard for us not to slip up and use gendered language to describe it. So how did everyone do that in their head? I unintentionally always thought of Murderbot as female.
I did as well.
Interesting.
I listen to the books and they're narrated by a man. So I don't think that I don't know how I would have reacted if I had read it. But when you have a male voice in your ear constantly telling, saying I, that's
See, I
Yeah.
listened to it as well, and I still imagined it as a woman. And whenever I talk about it, I have to correct myself. And like it.
Except for Gurethan and Art. I think of all of them as female.
Oh. Yeah, So my first time reading it, I read the physical book and I kind of went back and forth. I just kind of had like Sunny from iRobot, the movie representation in mind, but like even more gender neutral.
Hmm.
And when I was listening to the audiobook this time, I was like, oh, a lot of people are probably going to think that Murderbot is male because of the narrator. Um, so that is interesting. Just like, I mean, that's going to be hard, right? Because your narrator by the voice is probably be a bit male or a bit female, and that could influence your perception of the.
Hmm.
Yep.
But I think Wells did a really good job of like I don't know, hitting you over the head with this doesn't have a gender and
Yeah,
it's an it and it doesn't consider itself human and it's yeah.
And I think you
it
kind of
doesn't.
need to do that when you're trying to get that idea across. You need to hit people over the head with it.
Oh yeah, because we still didn't get it right.
Yeah, right?
Clearly.
We're still making mistakes.
Hmm.
So,
Um, do you
oh,
guys
sorry.
think that sexless viewpoint is relatable?
No. I mean, it's not relatable. Okay, let me put it this way. When I can't relate to not having a sex, but there's a lot of things about Murderbot I can't relate to.
Yeah.
So I am a very social person, and he's not. It's not. Um, but also, I very definitely identify as female, so it's kind of hard for me to imagine not identifying as a gender. So relatable is a bad word. I enjoyed him as a character. I liked him. He's relatable in the sense that he seems like a real person, like I did, but not relatable in the sense that I see myself in him, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Murderbot is incredibly easy to sympathize with,
Right.
but
Hmm.
often surprisingly difficult to predict how it's going to feel. For example, who didn't predict Murderbot running away from Dr. Mensta?
I didn't predict
Hmm.
that.
I didn't predict that.
I
Yeah,
was unsurprised, but I didn't predict it.
I love
Like,
that ending. I thought it was
it was so
perfect.
great.
Great
Um,
ending.
yeah. It's like when it happened, I was like, "Oh, that makes complete sense," but I didn't predict it.
Yeah, I
yeah.
like. Sorry,
Sorry,
go
the
ahead.
first time I read it, I totally was kind of like, where is this going? And then when you get to the last like paragraph and Murderbot's like writing this note to Mensa, but you don't really know exactly that it's writing the note
Hmm.
until like the very end. You're like, oh, it's leaving. So
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. It was sad too.
because throughout the whole first book, you see that Murderbot is developing this connection with Mensa. And a
Hmm.
lot of authors would take that and Mensa would go back to preservation and Murderbot would go with her and they'd like thrash out some sort of relationship. It would work, it would not work. There'd be tension, there'd be whatever most people would consider perfectly reasonable grounds for a continuing story. But Murderbot
Yeah.
says no. And I have to wonder how much of that is influenced by uh, Murderbot's complete ownership by the company and how much of an impression that left on Murderbot, uh, and how easy it is for the humans to underestimate that, even as they pretend that they understand it.
Yeah,
Uh,
Yeah.
I think that's a big
Mhm.
part of it. Um, so I have a question, guys,
Yep.
because I got the impression that it was the first contract he had after the mining incident.
No.
No?
No.
Okay. There was just the first nice people. I kind of felt like Dr. Mensa was a mother figure, but he needs to leave his mom in order to grow up, and he's growing up. Does that make sense?
I thought it was
Yeah.
more of a. Sorry, I thought it was more of a humans don't understand me because I'm not human, and
Well,
I
that's
don't
true
I don't
too.
have
Yeah.
human needs, and of course, yeah, it can be interpreted as a mother
I have
dog
teenage children,
relationship.
so maybe that's part of it.
But he's like, I mean, I like Mensa a lot, but she's going to expect things out of me that I can't give her, and I need to do things my way, and my way is not the human way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Guardian is a
where
nice word for owner.
Yeah,
exactly
And
that's
that's
true
what
on
too.
I'm saying.
preservation, you won't need your armor. You won't need combat. And such a severe unknown environment for Murderbot has to be really scary.
Mm-hmm.
And such a like assumed uh relationship of ownership
Right.
that also has to hurt.
It's patronizing in a lot of ways.
It is very patronizing, and it's not understanding that it's patronizing. So I can't
And
imagine it takes Mensa too long to figure that out.
no, probably not. But I liked how there's so many. It's a very complicated relationship emotionally for everybody involved, but they don't dwell on it. It's not like this. You just pick up the cues from the story. It's not like something that it's like
Yeah,
the opposite of Murderbot's soap operas.
Um, can I ask a question?
sure.
What's the company's name?
It is specifically unnamed.
Okay, that's good. I don't know it then. Why does the company make all of these constructs with like real emotions?
They make them with intelligence, and
Yes.
with the intelligence comes the emotions. So,
It's explained later on in books that we haven't read yet, but
well,
it's explained in greater detail later on,
I was
anyways.
gonna say it's hinted because Dr. Mensah calls
Yes.
it, what is she? I
A
can't remember her.
hellish compromise.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, then
They
I'll
had to
keep
make
in
it them smart enough to do security. And in doing so, they added most of a human brain.
Creepy. Does anybody think Art is a construct? Because I kinda think he might be. Because he's so I don't and I know Murderbot wonders about it.
Art is, I think Art's just a really, really smart bot.
Okay. Is that explained later?
I mean, it's gone into more,
Okay.
but Art basically has a supercomputer where SecUnit has a really nice desktop.
nice analogy.
Also a brain. Yeah.
Is Panda still here? Panda.
I
Yep,
think so.
I'm
Okay,
here.
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. Uh, Murderbot at times has to use this language, which is heavily in the third person. Murderbot has to say things like "this sec unit advises you," or like "this sec unit," or like "your contract advises you to leave this sec unit," or "you must kill this sec unit." Um, what kind of impact do you think that would make on a psyche that doesn't know any other way of life?
I think that kind of reinforces its objectness. So, regardless of gender, but I think the Murderbot does kind of, in some way, describe itself as an object and not as. I know it's a living thing, breathing, thinking, feeling thing, but I think it thinks that it's an object.
It's not even that much of a breathing thing. I mean, it has to breathe a little bit, but that's a whole thing when he gets on Art.
All
It
right,
Yep.
I have to pretend to breathe, make it look like I'm breathing.
yeah,
Well, I think it
It'll be
has to
interesting.
breathe, just not very frequently at all.
right.
Like,
When
Yeah,
he Oh, sorry,
yeah.
I
go ahead.
think when in the second book, Artificial Condition, where he is now seen as an augmented human and he's interacting with like Tapan and that crew, and there are moments where Murderbot's like, oh, I can take a moment and not just have to respond immediately. Because
Mhm.
Mhm.
when it was a sec unit, it was like programmed to, right? Like there's a governor module. If it takes too long to respond to a command or a question, then it would get punished. But being an augmented human or seen as an augmented human, it had more of a choice and it could choose not to answer a question, and that would have been okay with the human.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that that was a big change that we see in the second book.
And even though Murderbot like started to take advantage of that, it still had, as it realized at the end, it still had issues where it thoughtlessly obeyed more human commands than it should have.
Right. And
Mhm.
that's why he needed to leave the preservation people. He had to get away from that initial relationship they had in order to become whatever he's going to become.
It had to explore what freedom meant
Right.
because
Yeah.
it had never actually been completely free in its entire life.
Yep.
But that part where Dr. Mensa is like, "We're not going to leave you." I mean,
Yeah.
I seriously
Yeah.
got really choked up and oh shit. Okay, anyway.
Aw.
Sorry.
No, it
No,
was
it's
really
fine.
touching.
Yeah.
It was like borderline. It was like Sec Unit thought it was borderline unbelievable that a human would
Uh-huh.
actually do
Right.
that for a Sec Unit.
Right.
Right. Yeah. If I had been
I'm
watching this
sorry.
as like it's okay. If I had been watching this as a show or a movie, I would need tissue.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
I had to go blow my nose after I read that part or listened to that part.
I would love to see this as a television show.
Mm-hmm.
I would
Be
love
fun.
to see this as a show.
It'd be fun.
Absolutely.
It'd be so fun.
Moving on. Okay. Some people think that Sec Unit is a representation of neurodiverse people. How do people feel about that? Do you feel like Murderbot has autistic features, or I don't know, anything else?
Well, I do
Um,
have a nephew who is autistic, and so there were certain parts that rang very true to me about some of his behaviors. Um, its behaviors. A-
I also
and
think oh, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to
No,
say,
no,
I
no.
mean, neurodiversity is obviously very complicated and brings a whole lot of different things to the table that are really important.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, Murderbot's certainly neurodiverse.
yeah, well, I mean,
Neurobot
he's
is,
like,
is an amalgamation of a computer and a human brain put into a construct body that can regenerate most of its body mass.
right?
Yep.
Sorry,
And has
go ahead.
built-in internet connection.
Doesn't everybody though? It kind of feels like most people do, even like the
Mo-
people.
Most people have like earpieces that they use.
Yeah, the interfaces.
Yep.
Sky hooks, if you will.
Yes, skyhooks. Less intrusive though. They look more like Bluetooth headsets.
What were you gonna
Yeah.
say, Panda?
I was gonna say I think with Murderbot, a lot of it has to do more with the nurture part. Like maybe I think it's interesting because we don't see perspectives from other sec units. So we really only go off of Murderbot, but like do other sec units feel the same way, or is it more that Murderbot's personality is more, I guess, on the spectrum, or it has more to do with how it's been treated? And because um, they mentioned that the sec units, like, they avoid eye contact with each other when they're on the same contracts. They don't really like talk to each other, like hang out with each other or anything. They're very loner. They're supposed to just do their job and focus on their job. And there was even mention where if they needed to talk to sec units from a different contract, they have to go through hub system to have the conversation. So it's just everything is like very regimented. So it's not a surprise where now that Murderbot is free from that regimentation, it's having a hard time adjusting, and it's really testing the boundaries of its freedom of like what can I do and what are the consequences. um, so I feel like a lot of it is more of just how it's been.
You dropped out there, Panda, at the very end.
Oh, I
It's a
said
more a consequence of how it's been.
how it's been treated.
Okay.
This
I'd be inclined to agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think that it's really well stated when Murderbot and Art are having their conversation, their little psycho session. And Murderbot says, like, a bot and a construct can't be friends.
Right.
And they can't trust one another.
Well, and
It's
he even does that.
because a human can tell them to do anything and they'll have to obey.
Yeah.
I mean, he even talks about that a little bit in All Systems Red, because he has to kill all these other murder bots, and he doesn't want to. He's like, I'd like to say I'm not sentimental about this, but I got to do what I got to do, and it kind of sucks.
And actually, Murderbot like spares the life of two of them.
That's right.
It was like they were out of combat unless they could get back to a cubicle, and Murderbot says, "Well, they're not doing that anytime soon."
Right. Unfortunately, that comes back and bites him.
Unfortunately, it does. Exactly. That little bit of mercy that Murderbot showed, which Murderbot thought was effectively safe, ended up not being so. And do you think that Murderbot eventually starts escalating? And I mean, at the end of Artificial Condition, Murderbot definitively kills, beyond the hope of repair, quite a few people. Do you think that was influenced by the effects of saving people and having them come around later and bite Murderbot in the behind?
It's too late to go back now.
Okay.
So one thing that legitimately surprised me is when he broke the comfort unit's governor and let her go. That actually genuinely surprised me because of that incident back in All Systems Red. And I'm scared about that because she wanted to kill everybody.
So you think that Murderbot has actually increased in mercy over the course of the series?
I don't know about increased. I don't think that he necessarily maybe learned the lesson he should have learned. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to turn out.
Or resisted becoming too cynical?
Perhaps.
Do you think the Murderbot is becoming more human, or is that kind of the arc that we're going for?
I think that's definitely the arc that we're going for a bit, but I would be very disappointed if Murderbot became like a normal human being.
I actually think that it's not quite the arc that we're going for. Mostly because, so I kind of cheated. I have been listening to the interview that Martha Wells had been doing to promote the fifth book.
I mean, some people call that cheating, some people call that education.
Yep.
Thank you. And I think she said that the premise of the book was what was interesting about Murderbot is that it's not an AI that when it got its freedom, it wanted to become human. It has that struggle of no, humans are disgusting, humans are weak, they make suicidal decisions. Like, I'm better than that.
Can't argue with any of that.
Except he makes
As a
suicidal
human can
decisions.
confirm.
It's not suicide if the machine can put you back together again.
Okay.
Um, and I think the the arc is more about this AI figuring out what a free AI can be and what it wants to be. And so there are going to be, I think most of the becoming human is figuring out how to interact with humans as equals rather than as a servant. And that could be seen as becoming more human, but I think from my perspective, it's more about how it's figuring out how to actually be more I don't want to use the word human, but like more of a person, if that makes sense, like the status of a person.
I get it.
I think it's trying to figure out how to fully exist as someone with free will.
Yes.
Because in Artificial Condition we saw how Murderbot had unintentionally forgotten that they had quite a bit of free will and quite a bit of independence from their clients and from their
Mhm.
clients' desires and from their questions and from the whole idea of them going down to the station in advance. Murderbot realized that the best way to serve her clients in that situation would have been to prevent them from ever going to the planet in the first place.
Oh, and that
Yes.
part where he's feeling so guilty. He's like, I never should have let them go down there. What am I stupid?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. We'll use person instead of human. But he is learning what it is to be a free agent, a person who is capable. We would call that, though, I mean, it serves as a really good metaphor for what it is to become fully human as we learn how to be agents that affect our world and not are simply affected by it. Because
Thanks. That really.
Hmm?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm still in the process of becoming a human, if you view it that way.
Yeah, I could take a lot more advantage of my free will.
Oh no.
What was your point, Huron?
Oh well, when they describe it like that, it makes so. I was the one who was talking about the neurotypicality,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and what bothered me about that is that we're talking about an neurotypical or non-neurotypical person, and we're assigning them, at least for the story, as a non-human. And so I'm not going to be offended for non-neurotypical people because I'm not. But it always kind of bothered me that they would, have these robot characters that were supposed to be as I don't know, a metaphor for.
Mm.
Uh, but if the goal is to, like you said, become, you know, more okay with yourself and become an equal with other people and become more of a person, then that didn't bother me at all.
That's a good point here. And yeah, thank you for pointing that out. 'Cause
That is, yeah. Thank you very
I
much.
wasn't thinking about it in that way.
I think it's definitely a complicated metaphor for all sorts of different aspects of humanity that Murderbot is standing in for. Um,
Mhm.
and you can look at it and you can say, okay, this is an allegory for autism, but it's not. It's not a pure allegory for autism.
It's a
There's pieces and bits you can tease out which are very good metaphors and very good like thought experiments and examples that you can then apply to things about autism, but it's not just one thing.
Yeah, and that's
Mhm.
why I was saying
Yep.
he's in the process of becoming a person. Well, I'm still in the process of becoming a person. I mean, I
Same.
think we all are, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
You guys definitely. I'm already there.
I mean, okay, let's think about it this way then. If you had to assign an age to Murderbot in like the human development cycle, what age would you put Murderbot in?
Jeez, I don't
That's an
even
interesting
know.
question.
Uh,
Definitely, I think a teenager, because
Yeah.
especially at the end of the book, they're looking for independence. They're still learning a lot about themselves. Yeah.
So in some ways, I picture it as someone in their 30s, and in other ways as a teenager. Like he has a certain set of life experiences that a 17-year-old wouldn't have, but he's dealing with a lot of issues that a 17-year-old would.
I'd put
Could
it
you?
maybe as someone in their early 30s who's just left the military.
Like book 2 Murderbot.
Yeah,
I can
like
see
at
that.
the end of book 1, start of book 2, early 30s, just left the military. So they started in the military like in preschool.
Yes.
They were at military boarding school their entire life.
I mean, it definitely has that institutionalized feel.
So
Like,
they really didn't get to have their childhood, and so it's been delayed until their early 30s, and now they're getting the chance to have it, with all the growing pains that means. They're maybe not super well adapted to civilian life. They don't really know what that means.
I can buy
Um,
that.
But has the like cognitive ability to reason things through if given the opportunities and the time.
Parts of the Murderbot also reminded me of my grandmother.
oh,
And,
really?
well, her love for old terrible soap operas.
Oh yeah. What do people think Sanctuary Moon is? And if you already know what the author says it's supposed to be, you're not allowed to say until after we've all given our ideas. It's definitely a soap opera, and I imagine it as something like Grey's Anatomy and General Hospital meet Doctor Who with only humans.
Oh.
What do you think, Little Red?
I have not watched a lot of soap operas in my life. So I said the Love Boat because that's the only one I've ever watched.
Imagined a similar to Kip. I imagined soap opera, the General Hospital feel with werewolves, but on the moon. I don't know. Something about Sanctuary Moon just reminds you of werewolves.
I get
I like
that.
that.
I feel like there was a show called Sanctuary that had werewolves in it. But yeah, definitely the convoluted plot lines that they kept discussing were like, oh yeah, her like genetic mate had amnesia and then woke up and tried to kill her clone. That's soap opera. That's soap opera.
For sure. Although
I'll be
World
surprised if
Hopper
it's
sounded
not.
like a soap opera too. It just took place on an
Oh,
actual ship.
World Hoppers sounded very much like Star Trek.
I was imagining like ice road trekkers.
I was imagining like Star Trek, either TNG or Voyager.
Star Trek definitely has some soap opera elements to it, though.
I mean, yeah, it's not supposed to be realistic, right?
I love how Murderbot kept saying it's not supposed to be realistic.
But yeah, it's about the crew of a ship.
Love Boat.
Maybe the Orville.
That work.
Maybe World Hoppers could be like the Orville.
Okay, Panda, tell us.
Yes. Okay. So Sanctuary Moon is a version of how to get away with murder, which I've never seen before. So I wouldn't have
I
made
can't
that
see
connection.
that now.
Is that a show? I've never heard of it.
I mean, it's made by Shonda Rhimes, who made Grey's Anatomy, and they're very similar. So I
There
think
you
I
go.
get points for that.
And then World Hoppers is a version of like Stargate, and Stargate Atlantis.
Okay.
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 Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, I feel very edified now.
I should see Stargate. I've only done a couple episodes of like the first season, and I feel bad about that.
I've only seen the movie, so
Nerds.
Okay.
you
I've
haven't
seen
seen either,
Nerds,
have you?
Karen, you call us nerds for having not seen Stargate?
It's because he hasn't seen it.
I could look down on you for not wanting to watch it.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Whatever.
Also, just
Okay.
because I call you a nerd doesn't mean that I'm not one.
We're coming
mean,
up on 50 minutes. Let's have some time for closing thoughts. What do people think about Murderbot and the Murderbot Diaries? Will they continue with the series? And what books would they recommend to someone who likes Murderbot?
So I'll start since everyone else is being quiet.
Okay.
As I've said on several occasions, this is just so much fun. And it puts this super wonderful adventure around some really serious things. And I would recommend iRobot and the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. It's not nearly as action-y, adventure-y, but it explores all the same issues.
Okay.
I'll go next then. Yeah, I loved it. I definitely plan on continuing to read it, and I would recommend Fred the Vampire Accountant.
Oh, I've heard of that. Okay.
Okay.
It also just kind of follows not a sec unit, but just a person who's not what you expected him to be, and I like that. It's also first person and just very personal and pretty relatable.
I would expect an accountant to be a vampire.
Oh, and real quick, because I realized we never did this, out of a scale of 1 to 5, if you can add on to your final thoughts, where would you rate Murderbot? Just add that to your thing. So Hurin and
Oh.
Red, what would you have given it?
A 5 for just pure fun.
Okay.
I'll give it a 4.
Okay.
Yeah, so
No, go.
oh. I gave it a 5, and the thing is, All Systems Red, I think, sets it up really well, and then when you get further on, it just better and better. So it's like a 5, but like a lowish 5 because it does get better. And I I did see similarities in these books with Ancillary Justice in terms of like some of the AI tech, the way that the perspective is used to how like Murderbot uses drones and security camera flesh out its perspective the same way Ancillary, the character, does the same. And I cannot wait for the 6th book. I'm really excited that you guys want to continue, and I'm excited to get to the 5th book because that one is such a blast. I'm so happy that you are now on this journey.
I had actually had to stop myself from starting. That's also part of the reason why I listened to the 2 books a second time.
Well, I'm absolutely going to continue on in this series. I loved them. I've already read the rest of the books in the series, and I'm going to do it again, and I'm very happy and excited about it. I give this book a 5, and I don't give it a low 5 because I feel like it did such an excellent job setting up the world in the series that it deserves extra recognition for that. Even if maybe I enjoy some of the later books more because they get deeper into the characters, and you get to really play with the interconnections between books more.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I can't say ancillary justice because Panda took that.
I had a feeling you would say it, but I took it anyway.
You can still say it because you guys can agree on something. It's allowed.
I mean, sure. Ancillary justice, I definitely recommend for people who enjoyed this and want maybe a deeper, slower, more sedate, more thoughtful, and less actiony, though only slightly less actiony, series than All Systems Red. Breck from Ancillary Justice is very much in the vein of a human AI mixture that has mechanical and psychological augmentations, multitasks a lot, has problems understanding humans, and gets confused for one. Sometimes encourages that confusion. Great series. And there's a reason that Ann Leckie writes the Amazon promotional material for Murderbot. It's a reason there's quotes and testimonial. Yeah. But yeah, for other than that, I would recommend Isaac Asimov's specifically anything involving Susan Calvin, who invented the field of robopsychology. And
so I stole one of yours too.
You did. But I'm going to be more specific and say Caves of Steel, which involves R. Daniil Oliva, who is a robot that looks like a human for the first time.
Oh man, I'm gonna go back and read iRobot now.
Yeah.
Recall Empire also reminded me of Caves of Steel.
Anybody have anything that they really want to talk about in the closing thoughts?
Go
Not
read
closing.
it if you haven't. Go pick it up right now.
Yes.
Spoilers.
Go read All Systems Red. I'll say it again. Excellent book. You if you have any interest in sci-fi, or maybe even if you don't, you will not regret it. So thanks for joining us today on the Legendarium Green Team. Please join the Legendarium Discord or Reddit to yell at us about what we got wrong, or shout out at Green Team Pod on Twitter. If you're an exceptionally generous soul, please feel free to join our Patreon.